I just got a new 3D printer and I love painting. I also love the series The Punisher. I decided I'd try my hand at 3D printing models and painting them, starting with The Punisher as my first attempt. I found a 3D model of The Punisher from the designer SANIX, which you can get on their website shown here. In this video, I'm going to show you how I printed the head of the model and painted it. This will be part 1 of 2, where the second video I'll show you how I finished the rest of the model. So come along for the ride and learn how to paint 3D printed models with me. Alright, here are some more pictures of the model from SANIX. Now it's important to remember this is my first time doing this, so I'm learning a lot as I go here. Okay, to start, I printed the head in my 3D printer. It took a few attempts to get the printing right, so here are the settings I used in my Bambu P1S printer. Once I got a decent print, I started with priming the model using Mr. Surfacer 1000, which works well to preserve fine details. I started off using this agate skin colored paint. This paint has more of a rose tint to it and is a little darker, which works decently for a base color. In hindsight, I'd probably make it a little darker or more brown to start with the lower shades with a bit of red and work my way lighter from there. In a stupid move after this, I decided to add more red, and you'll see how poorly this turns out. Don't make your character Red Hulk like I did. Okay, here I basically went back with my skin tone of choice and applied it to the lighter medium tone parts of the face. It's effective to do this from the top at about a 45-degree angle where light kind of hits down from. Next, I use this medium flesh tone color, which is much more yellow, which is very useful in areas where there's less blood flow in your face. So specifically the forehead, the bridges under the eyes, and the chin, and also the bridge of the nose. Next, I applied the basic skin tone with a little bit of the light skin tone mixed in to highlight the very high points of the face where the light's the highest. At this moment, you can see I'm over applying it, which was a bit of a mistake. I tried to correct it by using the agate skin again, although you can see that the skin is just becoming very red. I took the medium flesh color back out to add more yellow, which seemed to help a little bit. Now, in hindsight, I would have highlighted the areas with the airbrush and then worked with an actual brush to start blending the colors in together using lighter washes. Basically, the airbrush is good for painting larger quantities, but the finer blends, I found it easier to use a brush by hand. The yellowy medium flesh tone did help flatten out the colors to make the face look a little less red. Next, I went to the basic skin tone, which is a bit lighter and less red than the agate flesh. I used this to re-highlight the lighter skin tone areas and leave the red that I'd already applied in the darker or more red areas. At this point, the base skin was starting to look pretty good. On a side note, I would suggest that you paint the hair earlier so that you can get a contrast to the skin and see the color more naturally. Now I decided that a 5 o'clock shadow would look good on the Punisher. To do this, I used my Nuln oil from my Warhammer set and just watered it down quite a bit more in the airbrush. I sprayed this shadow around the jaw and the cheeks and through the mouth area. I oversprayed the shadow a bit, so I went back with my basic skin tone and pulled the shadow back lightly by slowly spraying from the higher parts of the face down towards the shadow with a very thin wash of the skin tone in the airbrush. Once this looked more consistent, I went back to try to make the skin look a little more normal by adding some yellow and offsetting a lot of the red in the skin tone with some blue. I also added a little white flesh to lighten the skin a little bit. As you can see, I think I finally found a decent base skin tone with a lot less red in it. So I went ahead and painted the neck and added some of this paint over top of some of the face skin to make it look more neutral. At this point, I was happy with the skin, and it was time to move on to the hair. I started the base hair coloring using this brown Rhinox hide paint so that the transition wouldn't be so hard from skin to hair. I went and applied a couple coats of this in order to get a more opaque color. I think this step is mostly unnecessary, but if you're trying to blend the hair colors into the skin, maybe you'll get some use out of it. To get the Punisher's true hair color, I took a black paint and added a little bit of white to it to make it slightly off black. I used a pretty thin coat of the paint to brush it on so that I don't cake it on too thickly. I applied 2 or 3 layers to get a more opaque color without making it too thick. Once I had the consistency of the base hair color I wanted, I then grabbed a gray color, shown here, and used my dry brush to bring out the highlights of the hair at the top and add some dimension and some semblance of light reflecting off the top of someone's hair. I went back to the side of the head to cover the highlights since there's no light that really hits the side of the head. To make the hair transition look more normal, I blended in some skin color at the edges of the hair to make the scalp hair transition look more natural. In hindsight, I would have used more of a wash, a thin coat of paint for this, to just translucently add the skin tone on top of the hair instead of it being so thick. I also just went back with the base hair color black and touched up the area around the forehead where it meets the hairline. The eyeballs kill me now. At this point, I was starting to work on the very fine details of the face, so I got my magnifying glasses out to be able to see better. Here, I'm working on the eyebrows, starting with the brown like I did with the base hair. I then moved on to the black color that I also used for the hair. A technique that helped me here was that after I thinned the paint, I took the brush and drained some of the water out of it by touching it to a tissue, so I could paint strokes on the eyebrows without them running and being much finer. At this point, I wanted to seal in the work I had done so I don't screw up the paint. So I used a matte clear coat to seal it and prevent any shine to make the skin look normal. Alright, moving on, I used the red Mephiston color to add some blood and scars to his face to make him look a little more rugged. I started with the red and then added some washed black into the scar to make it look a little less clean. Some of these scars were built into the model, but on the forehead I just added this blood to make it look a little cooler. Now that I have the clear coat applied, I can use a Q-tip with water and just erase some of the excess paint of the red without worrying too much about erasing the paint underneath. Alright, moving on to the lips. So for the lip color, obviously I don't want anything too stark, since I don't want him to look like he's wearing lipstick. So I just used basic skin tone and added a bit of red, and used a light wash and layered up until it started to look pretty naturally pink. I already painted the ears following the rest of my skin tone color on the face, but I had an issue with the 3D print where there were some holes in the ears that didn't quite fill properly. Okay, fix the ears. So at this stage, I'm just adding some ABS slurry to fill the holes and then kind of sand it back and paint back over it. Okay, and now on to what I think was probably the hardest part of this paint job, the eyeballs. First, I used my light flesh color, since it is mostly white, but not a full white that looks too stark compared to actual human eyes, so this white ended up looking pretty natural. Basically what I did here is layer a bunch of white onto the eyeballs, and I missed the lines a bit, which I'll clean up later, but I thinned my paint and then dried the brush on a paper towel to pull some of the water out so that the paint wouldn't run so much and streak everywhere. After maybe 6 or 7 coats, I got a pretty opaque consistency. Looking closely at Jon Bernthal's face, you can see he has pretty dark brown eyes. So to paint his pupils, I used the Rhinox hide brown again first. It's really important to take your time here and be clean when drawing the irises. I'd suggest small marks to build up a circle, and make sure the circle touches both the top and bottom eyelid to make the scale look proper. Again, it's good here to also do a few layers of lighter paint. But yeah, if you overdraw the paint on here, you pretty much have to start over painting the eye again, since the dark brown is going to be hard to remove from on top of white without leaving a dark stain on the white paint. The magnified glasses I used here were pretty critical for me to get this done cleanly. And here now you can see both eyes painted white with the brown irises painted down. Now it's time to paint the black pupils in the middle. I didn't find this part too difficult. Just make sure your paint's not too runny, and then do small dabs to build a circle in the middle of the eye. Up close here though, you can see the brown and black, and the irises are pretty circular. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. Alright, at this point, I just added some more skin tone back to the eyes and tried to balance the colors out by using thinner washes and cleaning up all the spots that I overpainted the white onto the skin. I then added more skin tone with a bit of red, specifically around the eyelids where there's a bit more of blood coloring. Overall at this point I was mixing some of the colors back and forth to try to make the skin look as normal as possible in the areas I thought. So it is a bit of working back and forth with your paint and working with your eyes to see what looks right. Alright, wrapping up, now you can see I have everything done on the face. To make the eyes look a little more realistic, I added some gloss clear coat to the eyeballs, which will make it reflect more and look wet. You can see here, it adds some life to the eyes. Then, I added a similar gloss to the blood to also make it look wet. Finally, I used a semi-gloss clear coat on the hair to give it a bit of a shine. And there it is, the fully painted face sculpt for the Punisher 3D printed model. Here you can see the before and after from the printed to the fully painted sculpt. You can also see my painting compared to his face in the series. Coming up in part 2, I'll show you how I made the rest of the model and put it all together. Hey, thanks for staying all the way to the end. If you want to see more of these printing and painting videos, let me know in the comments. And let me know if you're interested in seeing my failed paintings, because I have a lot of them and they're pretty terrible. Anyways, see you in the next one.